ever meet a black man that's so anti-black you just feel like it's a setup? That's Clarence Thomas, the longest-serving judge on the Supreme Court, and the one most committed to rolling back the very rights that allowed him to rise. And his wife? That's the kind of white woman that's every black woman's worst nightmare. But we'll get to her. So let's start at the beginning. Clarence Thomas was born in 1948 in Pinpoint, Georgia, dirt poor and Jim Crow raised. He grew up speaking Gullah, was raised Catholic, went to seminary, and almost became a priest. But racism followed him everywhere until he flipped. And I don't mean flipped the system. I mean flipped on us. By the time he reached Yale Law School, he started to resent affirmative action. Not the racism that made it necessary, but the fact that white folks assumed he didn't belong. Instead of challenging them, he decided to join them. And in the 1980s, he got cozy with the conservatives. Reagan appointed him to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. But instead of protecting black workers, this man gutted the very civil rights regulations that he was hired to enforce. Then George H.W. Bush made... Sorry, you can't make this shit up. Then George H.W. Bush made him a Supreme Court justice in 1991. They call it replacing Thurgood Marshall, but he's no replacement. He took the seat. And that's when Anita Hill happened. A brilliant black woman came forward, under oath. And
I know that there's somebody out there that might disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's all right. Because I got something that's been sitting heavy in my chest, okay, for the last few days. And I'm going to go ahead on and say what I feel needs to be said, okay? There's a man sitting on the highest court in this land, the Supreme Court of the United States, and his name is Clarence Thomas. Now, I want you to hear me before you come for me in the comments, okay? Because this is not about his skin color. This is about what he has done with the power that the struggle of other people has put within his reach. Clarence Thomas got into Yale Law School through affirmative action. He said so. The very policy that opened the door for him, he spent decades on that court working to slam it shut for everybody else, okay? Now, I'm a historian, right? And I know what that looks like. I've seen that playbook before. There's an old saying, and it is old. It's rooted in wisdom, and it's earned the hard way. This old saying says, all skin folk ain't kin folk, okay? Zora Neale Hurston, she knew it. Thurgood Marshall, he knew it. When Thomas was nominated to replace Marshall, Marshall made it plain. A black face in a high place doesn't automatically mean your interests are being represented. Got it? Representation without advocacy is just decoration, isn't it? And here's what makes it sting differently than plain old political disagreement. Clarence Thomas didn't just benefit from the struggle, he used it. He climbed the ladder that black sacrifice, black blood, black legal brilliance built, and then he turned around and kicked that ladder down. Dare anybody else to try to climb it. That's not a philosophical difference. As far as I'm concerned, that's a betrayal. And his wife, Jenny, she was neck deep in the events of January the 6th, and he has refused to recuse himself from cases connected to it. The ethics questions alone should have everybody around here alarmed about that. But here's what I need you to sit with today. The presence of a black face can be used to, let's say, legitimize harm. Sometimes more powerfully than if a white face had done the same thing. Why? Because it provides cover. It confuses people. It makes them question what they know to be true. Now, don't be confused, family. You can love your people and hold your people accountable. Those are not opposites. All skin folk ain't kin folk. And as a historian, I always follow the record, not the optics.
Yo, what's up everybody? So welcome back to the channel. Yeah, today we have a very annoying topic, I'd say that, yeah. This is a topic that has lots of people talking, and these talks are not positive talks, I'd say so. These are backlashes to Clarence Thomas, yeah, because black Americans are really not holding back. They are really not holding back after comments, yeah, after comments and rulings connected to voting rights started trending again. And this time round, we have a different discussion because Clarence Thomas went ahead and did something that really pissed off lots of people. And when I say pissed off, I really do mean it because we are going to see the videos that people are reacting to. Videos of people reacting to his decisions. Yeah? Because many people feel like they have been coasted a lot. And when I say this, we have to talk about it because this topic gets heated so much since it involves rights of people in America, especially the black community. Yeah. And how did Clarence Thomas go against the black community? Having in mind he's a black person too. That's something that we need to talk about. So guys, let's pay attention to the videos that I'm going to play for you today as I come back at the end with my commentaries.
Here's a guy who, by his own admission, and there should be no shame in this, by the way, got into Yale Law School because of affirmative action. I think that was fabulous. I think nothing wrong with it. He apparently is ashamed of it, so much so that once he became a jurist on the courts, he decided his first and foremost obligation, apparently, was to help usher out the very programs that had opened the door for him. I'm not sure how to think about that except to believe that that is someone who does not have a problem with the system of white supremacy that marginalizes other black folks as long as he got his. And he got his, and then he got out and basically said, that's it, we're done with that. I think if you look at his rulings, and particularly if you contrast his behavior as a judge and as a justice with the man he replaced on the court, Thurgood Marshall, you know, it's very interesting to see that one of the greatest jurists in American history when it comes to civil rights and when it comes to human rights and progressivism was replaced by one of the most reactionary justices because George H.W. Bush knew that you had to replace the black justice with another black justice. He didn't want to replace him, however, with the black justice that had a connection to the movement, that had a connection to the struggle. So he found one that had no connection to the struggle and, if anything, was ready to spit on the struggle. You look at what Clarence Thomas has said in these voting rights cases. He is perfectly prepared, apparently, to uproot the Voting Rights Act of 1965 because he thinks, as do many of his white colleagues, that we can trust the states that have a history of racism to just do everything right, which of course is absurd. The only reason they've been doing things right lately is because there's a law in place that forces them to do things right. And as Justice Ginsburg said, to say that you can get rid of that law just because it's working right now is like saying that I don't need my umbrella when it's raining because I'm not getting wet. Now, you're not getting wet because you got an umbrella. That's why.
Clarence Thomas never misses an opportunity to disappoint me. In a 6-3 decision today, the Supreme Court voted to dismantle the Voting Rights Act. 6 conservative justices, including Clarence Thomas, voted to disenfranchise millions of black voters, voters of color all across America. And all of them should be held accountable, don't get me wrong here. But specifically Clarence Thomas, being only one of 2 black justices, the only black man on the court, votes to dismantle the voting rights of his own community? The same community that worked for decades to uplift black voters and black voices in our government votes to then go undermine all of that work. That's despicable. Am I surprised? No. Am I disappointed? Always. But this issue just really blows my mind. The cognitive dissonance he can have sitting on the highest court of the land, never has to worry about getting elected, makes a decision that makes it so much more difficult for black voices to be amplified in our government. Shame on you, Clarence Thomas. Shame on...
You know, I didn't get a chance to speak out against, the situation with the Voting Rights Act, and the Supreme Court justices. but one in particular, Clarence Thomas. The fact that this man is a black man, and as we know, he probably grew up in the most difficult time and watched his black people suffer and go through things not even imaginable. And for him to vote with those other 5 justices to come for the Voting Rights Act, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. And the look that I would have for him if I saw him, yes, because that makes no sense. What a complete disgrace. And that saying, not all skin folk is kinfolk, baby, that's definitely him.
Clarence Thomas had no problem walking through every door that was created for him because of his race. And that gratitude is followed by him shutting the door behind him for everybody else.
Clarence Thomas wakes up every day and says rats when his melanin-eating virus that he's building in a laboratory under the Supreme Court doesn't work. One time, Clarence Thomas went to a bar and punched out a mirror, and they're like, why did you do that? He's like, my bad, I was drunk. I thought I saw another black man.
Listen, after doing the research for this very professional piece, by the way, with no tinfoil hat theorying, I don't do that on my Substack. You cannot convince me that Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court isn't in the files. That man for sure ate some babies. I'm just saying. That's my conspiracy theory, because it's either that or somebody needs to take his picture with a flash, like in Get Out, to get him out of the sunken place.
Why did my husband, who is white, just ask me, doesn't Clarence Thomas know that he's black? Or is he just the black white supremacist from the Chappelle Show?
If Clarence Thomas isn't an Uncle Tom, then why did he shut the door that he used himself to get to his position for millions of black people across this country? Because by revoking the 1965 Voter Rights Act, he has done exactly that. He has basically burnt the same bridges that he used to get to his successful point for everybody else that's in the same position that he was once in. So my question still remains. Is Clarence Thomas considered an Uncle Tom? Are you going to say that I don't have a right to ask this question? I'd like to hear what you have to say in the comments. But what I do know right now is that he is more voting for his class than his culture, because his class is that of the 1%. He believes that he deserves to go to that island because there's allegations of him going there. He believes that he's a part of an elite group rather than remembering the culture that brought him up. Now, I can't speak to that culture, but I can respect it, and I still can't imagine that someone of that culture would then burn the bridges that helped him get to where he wanted to go for millions of black people across this country. How is that possible, and why isn't there a battle cry asking for his resignation for the...
You know, Clarence Thomas is actually a DEI hire. He was put in there by the Bush administration. Yeah. After Clarence Thomas died. After Thurgood Marshall died.
Thurgood Marshall, yeah.
So Thurgood Marshall was off the court. So they went, where can I find a nigga who will do... Because there weren't that many conservative black people back then.
Right, they needed to find a Republican black judge.
And he was it. I think he was in charge of the Fed. I don't think he was even a judge. I think he was a lawyer, but...
He wasn't a judge?
I think... Don't misquote me, but I'll say this. He was so unremarkable that for decades he said...
Yes, before being appointed Supreme Court, he was a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Columbia Circuit.
Right, and so he was an unremarkable judge.
Okay.
But MAGA loves unremarkable people. They love... MAGA picks black men the same way white dudes pick dogs. They want obedient dogs. They want dogs that do what they want. Name me a remarkable black man they pick. Is Tim Scott remarkable? Is Byron Donalds remarkable? Is Clarence Thomas remarkable? They'll never have a street, a library, or have a stamp. their whole reason for existing is because they're amenable, they're obedient.
Clarence Thomas has been mentioned in the Epstein files. He's, of course, one of Donald Trump's very close Supreme Court allies. The allegations against him, Trump, and Epstein in this document are truly unbelievable. Take a look. This individual claims to be a target of Donald Trump, saying in 2014 a CIA agent tricked me into going to Epstein's in Palm Beach. He said I was going to a holiday party. I got there with him and was handed a drink and I was drugged once again. He took me to a room and said, "Wait here, I'll be right back," and immediately the door was shut and locked by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. I was locked in a room to be repeatedly SA'd. At one point, the butler unlocked the door and standing there was Donald Trump. She says I wasn't his cup of tea. He said to a man, "Make sure she drinks some of that so she forgets I was here." Then he said to the butler, "Only open the door that you think I will like." Going on to say in 1998, my boss at Bank of Boston said there were psychopaths in the CIA and FBI playing a game. He said that Donald Trump was involved and was in this PDF ring. He mentioned Justice Clarence Thomas, who I didn't know. He told me I was sold to the CIA by the man who pretended to be my father, the man that repeatedly SA'd her and trafficked her. She says I didn't believe it at the time, but I do now. She claims agents here in Florida took her from her bed, and she believes they are psychopaths. She remembers a short agent asked me if I had a bad luck nightshirt. This is because she was allegedly in the same shirt multiple times when they abducted her. She goes on to say her memory is foggy at times because she was given substances that are meant to erase your memory. She says her head was smashed with a hammer and that she was electrocuted repeatedly with somebody telling her, "You're not going to talk about the kidnapping you witnessed, right, Christine?" She claims somebody who SA'd her named John took a picture of her to send to Clarence Thomas. She then goes on to say Clarence Thomas SA'd her at a church in Massachusetts when she was about 4 or 5 years old. These are just allegations, very serious and specific ones, but still they've not been proven. What many people find concerning are not just the allegations themselves, but whether or not actual investigations followed, because nobody involved has been held accountable.
Watch this 40-second clip of Justice Clarence Thomas during his Senate hearing for the Supreme Court. This is what a real justice and a real man is really about in America.
You're here, though. Some people have been spreading the rumor that perhaps you're going to withdraw. What's Clarence Thomas going to do?
I'd rather die than withdraw. If they're going to kill me, they're going to kill me.
So you'd still like to serve on the Supreme Court?
I'd rather die than withdraw from the process. Not for the purpose of serving on the Supreme Court, but for the purpose of not being driven out of this process. I would not be scared. I don't like bullies. I've never run from bullies. I never cry uncle, and I'm not going to cry uncle today, whether I want to be on the Supreme Court or not.
I remember watching that hearing. I was a teenager at the time, and I thought to myself, man, they are horrific to that guy. And you know what the worst one was? You saw him, Senator Joe Biden. He was horrific to him. The stuff they put Clarence Thomas through is a huge black eye on this country for a black man trying to get on the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. There was a thing about a Pepsi can. Look it up. I remember. It was humiliating for him, and he had death threats, but he stood fast and he stayed because that man would rather die than withdraw. That right there, folks, is a man.
I don't care what y'all say, I am fully convinced at this point, Clarence Thomas is not aware that he's a black man. When Clarence Thomas goes to brush his teeth in the morning, this is what he sees reflected back to him in the mirror. Cause what do you mean Clarence Thomas attacked the Brown v. Board of Education ruling, suggesting that the Supreme Court overreached his authority in the landmark decision that banned separating school children by race? Basically, on Thursday, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a South Carolina congressional map that a lower court said had been racially gerrymandered to openly discriminate against black voters in the state. Clarence Thomas then began attacking previous iterations of the court for its boundless view of equitable remedies and flexible power, pointing to precedents like Brown v. Board of Education, stating that it was an extravagant use of judicial power at odds with the history and tradition of the equity power and the framers' design. Basically stating that the Supreme Court overreached its power by banning segregation in schools. Clarence Thomas, you are a black man, bro. I know it breaks your heart to hear somebody tell you that, but you are black. Stop acting like you're not.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know why this topic got heated so fast? Because it involves the black voting rights in America. Yeah, the voting rights in America. And when we talk about this, we talk about lots of sacrifices that were put earlier just to gain this. The blood that was shed during these, yeah, just to gain these voting rights. Guys, the marches that people had just to gain these voting rights, yeah, it never becomes about politics. It becomes about the community now. Yeah. The jail time suffering that people went through just to get these voting rights in America. This is what Clarence Thomas just went ahead and disrupted for the black community. So when people feel like somebody is making it harder to vote, especially somebody who looks like them, it's going to get personal so quick. And that's why we have so many reactions outside here, yeah, facing his backlash. Folks are basically saying that, how are you going to sit in one of the highest positions in America and support decisions people believe weaken the protections for minority voters? How do you do that? Having in mind, don't forget, having in mind the guy just got the opportunity because of the sacrifices that people put, yeah, just to get the voting rights. That's how he was seated on that seat. And later he comes back and turn away from his people, chooses that he's going to go against that. Yeah? That's the energy right now, guys. You can imagine that's the energy right now. He made a decision that is really poor. And so many people were shocked, including I, because, oh, bro, you really got that seat just because people fought for that, and you go ahead and damage after you're in the seat, bro. Instead of protecting your people, you go ahead and damage it. Some people are saying that Clarence Thomas represent conservative values more than black interests. Yeah. Others defending him, saying that he was trying to. Okay, like others were saying, just because he's black doesn't mean he thinks like everybody else, that he's not supposed to support the black people. So others are saying he has a different thinking. And honestly, that's right. This is why this conversation explodes every single time it happens. Because on one side, people see voting rights as sacred, especially after everything black Americans historically have gone through. It is seen as something sacred, yeah, just to access the ballot box. It is something sacred for them right now. So going ahead and spoiling it for them, nah. And expecting it to go just normal, it is going to be on the other side, trust me. No? Some conservatives are outside here arguing, yeah, these laws are about election security and states having more control. Now, personally, I think what really makes people emotion rise is the feeling of representation. Having someone who's just from where you are represent you well without any cause of damage. That's what's making people explode out here. When somebody reaches the level of Supreme Court, yeah, community natural expects that that person is going to protect them. And that's the reason people are exploding out here. Since this guy went ahead and did not protect their rights. Yeah. So when decisions go opposite directions, people definitely will feel betrayed. So this is all about betrayal, guys. You got one side saying that he was trying to protect the Constitution. Others saying that, nah, he forgot where he came from. Yeah. What do you think this is about? And the comment sections are really looking like the final boss of political arguments right now, because I don't think anyone is going to rest about it. I don't think so. Everyone is trying to understand why would he do so? Yeah? Why would he not protect his people? Seriously though. This isn't those topics where people just scroll because it touches race, power, history, and identity at once. No. This is about someone who betrayed his own community after gaining something that was valuable to the community. Yeah. So drop down in the comments, guys. Do you think that people were being unfair to Clarence Thomas? Or do you think that he really betrayed the black community with his vote? Until the next video, let me catch you subscribing down there, sharing the video, and giving it a thumbs up. Thank you.